preset to be applied to any future projects in Premiere Pro. Here you're gonna learn this awesome blur rotating transition. Big shout out to Justin Odisho, another YouTuber who came up with this effect, or at least he's the first person I saw creating this sort of custom blur transition. So let's dive in, and I'm also going to show you how you can save it as a preset so that in future projects you can quickly apply it to any cut. Awesome. So in Premiere Pro, you're going to want to start a new sequence and put a couple clips down. So I'm just going to take one of my video clips. These are from pexels.com, a great place to find sort of free video clips. And I'm just going to put two clips next to each other and get it like so. Awesome. So let's zoom in here. And so you'll want to have two video clips butt up next to each other. Next, we want to create an adjustment layer. You can do that by going to the new item button, clicking adjustment layer. It will save it to the size and the time base of the last sequence that you are working on or you've created in Premiere Pro, so that's good. Select OK, and now you'll see it in your project panel. Now drop that onto your timeline on the second track. Now what you want to do is cut this to about the right length for how long this transition is going to be. So using my keyboard, I'm just going to go over 7 frames. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I can either drag the end of this video clip in, just like so, or you can do different things like you could trim it, cut it, delete it. 7, there you go. You can trim it, delete it. There's also keyboard shortcuts that can speed that up, which I'll show you in another video. Now I want to duplicate this adjustment layer to the third track, actually. So holding the Option key on a Mac and dragging this up will create another duplicate, or the Alt key if you're on a PC. Now what I want to do is actually extend the edges of these video clips. If I went in here and I did a transform, which I'm going to actually apply to the second adjustment layer. So in Effects, just type in transform. So you can do that first. It's under the distort menu. And then I rotate this. See what happens? As I rotate it, you have this black transparency behind it because this video isn't big enough to basically fill the frame. So for this first adjustment layer, we're going to add an adjustment that extends the edges of this video in a cool, unique way. Notice too that if I go in and I didn't use the transform tool or effect, if I just went into the motion rotation of this video effect or this adjustment layer, nothing happens. And that's because the motion of the adjustment layer, it does not affect anything beneath it. Only effects applied to the adjustment layer will affect the video beneath it. Awesome. So forget about this second layer for now. Let's create this extended edge version of this video. We can do that first by typing in replicate in our effects bin. Take that replicate tool, go to the replicate options in effects controls and type in 3. So now we have this grid. Now we're going to use the mirror effect, and I'm going to drop this onto this adjustment layer. And what that does is it mirrors this sort of composition or this grid. And if we type in 90, you'll kind of see the reflection that we've created. And so now I can use the position of this reflection with the X and the Y properties to drag up or down this mirrored version. Basically, what I'm doing is trying to match the edge. So if I make this a little bit bigger, maybe you can see easier. See how there's this edge right here? And if I drag this up or down, I'm trying to meet that edge. So for me, in this composition, around 719 works perfectly. Now I'm just going to do that a few more times, but this time with the mirror, I'm going to type in -90, and I'm going to drag it up so that we mirror the top edge. So now, as you can see here, I've mirrored the top edge and the bottom edge. Now I have to do the left and right. So a mirror again. For this one, I'm just going to use the X property and drag to the left somewhere around there. If it overlaps just slightly, it often is totally fine. And I'll do one more mirror. This time the reflection angle is going to be 180. And now you don't see anything, but if I drag to the left, you'll see everything appear and keep going until that left side of the grid the center video in the grid looks good. All right, so now we have this sort of mirrored grid, and it looks a little wonky right now. But if we go back into our adjustment layer up here with the transform tool and we scale up to 300, then what happens is it scales the grid up itself. So if I actually zoom out, you can see that we're zooming into the original video. So I want to do this up to 300 so it fills the frame. So now if I go from this frame in the video timeline to this one where the adjustment layers are being applied, you can't really tell any differences, except you do see that the edge of this, I might have brought that in a little bit too much. So if I go back down here, let's extend it just a little bit more. This transition, though, is going to happen so quickly, and you do get a little pixelation because we're zoomed in, but that's okay because it's going to go by so fast that you won't be able to tell any sort of distortion. Awesome, so now we're done with this adjustment layer on the bottom. Let's move back to the top adjustment layer, and first we're going to change the shutter angle. So uncheck under Transform, uncheck the Use Compositions Shutter Angle button, and type in about 250 for this shutter angle. Between 200 and 360 is good. The higher, the more blurry you're going to get. So now nothing has happened. What we're going to do is actually create an animated rotation using keyframes for the rotation property. So first set a keyframe by clicking the toggle animation stopwatch over there. Drag this keyframe all the way to the left to the start of this adjustment layer. And then type in +1 or 360. So this is going to create a transition that rotates 360 degrees. So if I drag this to the right, you'll notice that things start to get a little crazy because it's actually spinning our composition 360 degrees. Now notice though, because we've extended the edges, we don't get that black background around this layer anymore. And that's because we mirrored it, replicated it, and we extended the edges. And because it's spinning, you can't really tell that it's a mirrored edge or anything like that. This is a pretty render intensive effect. And so to really see this in action, I'm going to set my endpoint with I and then O around this. And then I'm also going to set it to loop. If you don't see loop, just click this little plus button. Make sure you have the loop icon right here and drag it down into your buttons for the program window. And pressing the return button on the keyboard will render this out so that we can actually see it in action. So now we have this sort of spin effect. We can make this look a little bit better in two ways. So one is by going and adjusting the speed of the rotation. So if we drop down this little arrow next to this keyframe toggle button, you can see that we have this linear speed. This is just a graph representing the speed that just is straight. If we select both of these keyframes and right-click them and choose Bezier, you can see that the speed actually starts to have a curve to it. And so the speed ramps up into the middle and it's faster. See how it says velocity right here is 2 times 83.6 per second. If we go here, it's only 1 times or 321 times. And so now if we render this out, we're getting a little bit more of a sort of pop to this animation and a speed ramp. And I think that feels a little bit more natural. If you want to bring this in, these keyframes in even more to add a little bit more of a pop, you can do that. Just pay attention though, because in Premiere Pro, I'm going to extend this edge so I can see this little edge over here just a little bit more. In Premiere Pro, it's very easy to, while you're dragging to the left or to the right with this little handle, it's also easy to drag up or down, which can mess up with the actual value of the rotation, which might mean that it actually rotates counterclockwise and back and forth, which can look a little awkward. So that seems to work pretty good. So just pay attention and be careful if you do extend that time like so. The only other thing I'll mention is doing a little cross-dissolve transition in between these two clips can help. So right-clicking in between them and applying the default transition, or selecting in between and pressing Command D to create sort of a 1 or 2 frame cross-dissolve can help. So let's just put this cross dissolve in the middle. Let's render it out. And so now that little cross dissolve can kind of blend that blurring action together. And so that's pretty much what this transition is. Now let's create a preset that we can use for if we have a bunch of cuts, for example, and we want to bring it down and add this to another clip. Okay, so say we have this clip of the brush and we want to quickly apply it to this transition over here. Well, what we could do is copy and paste these adjustment layers just by selecting them, option dragging or alt dragging if you're on a PC, and dragging them over. But say you're in a brand new project and you want to apply the same exact effect to new adjustment layers. Well, you don't want to have to build it all from scratch. So go into your adjustment layers and save each adjustment layer as a preset. So for this first adjustment layer, select the mirror options. So I'm command clicking all of these mirror options and replicate. Right click and choose save preset. So I'm going to just call this edge extend 2. I already have one saved, and so I'm just going to name that 2. Select OK. And now for the top one, go into the transform and right click and again save this transform as a preset, and we'll call this rotation 2. Now in terms of the type of preset, I would save it to the scale, and that means that if your adjustment layer is longer or shorter, it's going to match this animation to the length of your adjustment layer. So see how we set the in and the out point, or the keyframes, to start at the very beginning and end at the very end of this adjustment layer? Say we make it a 3-second or a 1 second or a 24-frame adjustment layer, it's going to match the length of this transition for the length of the adjustment layer to speed or slow it down. So I'm going to set OK. Now pretend we're in a brand new project. We've created a new adjustment layer. We want to apply our effects to this adjustment layer. All we have to do now is go into our effects bin. And now if we go into our presets folder, you can see that we have our rotation 2 that I'll apply to this top adjustment layer. And then I'll also apply, let me undo that actually so you can see if I just apply the edge extend to the bottom one, see how it automatically extends the edges using what the techniques we did. Now rotation 2 to this top one. And now if we add a quick cross dissolve, something like that, render it out, you'll see that we automatically have this rotation blur transition applied to it. Pretty cool, right? Awesome. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comments. And of course, check out my other tutorials because we have some more cool transitions, including some zoom blurs and some panning blur transitions that might help you out.